HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The 9 Lives of Pakistan. Dispatches from a Precarious State by Declan Walsh. Read by Roger Clark. Who's without sin in the city of my beloved? Go forth in the streets today in your fetters. By Faiz Ahmed Faiz. Prologue. May 2013. On my last night in Pakistan, the angels come to spirit me away. It is a balmy summer evening in Lahore, the ancient city of Mughal splendor down by the border with India. Lying on my bed in the Avari, Lahore's grandest hotel, I stare at the ceiling and listen. Sounds of jubilation drift in. Honks, hoots, and cries, the urgent stampede of hundreds of feet. An historic election is underway, the kind that promises to reshape the destiny of a nation. And this is the street music of democracy, Pakistani style. Tens of millions of people have voted, forming impatient lines or elbowing their way into polling stations across this vast country. From the twinkling, snow-dusted Himalayas to muggy villages on the Arabian Sea. Here in Lahore, as the sun dips low, the most fervent citizens are parading down the Mall, the city's elegant tree-lined boulevard. They pass under my window, men tottering on cheap motorbikes, 3 to a seat, or scampering past on foot, waving placards emblazoned with images of cricket bats, tigers and arrows, symbols that help illiterate voters identify their chosen party. On my phone, I scroll through scattered reports of election day trouble, a gunfight outside a polling station in rural Punjab, a Taliban bombing in the port city of Karachi that killed 11, and a clash between rival political factions in the restive province of Baluchistan. Compared with the chaos of recent years, however, this is small-scale violence, and on the whole this election is shaping up to be a startling success. Pakistanis have voted in record numbers. The main parties have promised to accept the result. A winner is emerging. On my television, the prime-time anchors, gabby men in shiny suits, stride excitedly before giant screens, making feverish predictions. But the triumph of the day transcends any one party. For the first time in Pakistan's history, an elected, civilian-led government has completed its term of office and is about to hand power to another one. It might seem a small achievement, but in Pakistan, it is stupendously good news. For 60 years, Pakistani leaders have departed power in handcuffs or coffins, expelled by military coups, rigged votes, or lurid assassinations. A relatively clean vote? This is novel. Across town, at the home of a well-known lawyer, my Pakistani friends are glued to the TV, exhilarated witnesses of history in motion, trading gossip and sipping bootleg scotch. I wish I could join them, but I can't. For one thing, a towering man with a sullen face stands outside my room, preventing me from leaving. His colleague is stationed at the end of the corridor, next to the lift. 2 more are positioned in the lobby. They work for Inter-Services Intelligence, the military's powerful spy agency, known as the ISI. Plainclothes ISI operatives can be found in towns and cities across Pakistan, low-key but ubiquitous, like pigeons on a power line. With experience, it is easy to spot them, with their tinted window jeeps, handheld radio sets, and air of unspoken menace. In Urdu, Pakistanis call them farishte, or angels, a double-edged euphemism that refers both to the traditional white long shirts typically worn by ISI men and to the vast, uncircumscribed powers at their disposal. The angels, as everyone knows, can knock on any door, flout any law, question or harass, or even abduct any citizen. Tonight, I am the object of their attentions. After 9 years in Pakistan, I have been ordered to leave. Their job is to ensure that I go. The trouble started 3 days earlier in the capital, Islamabad. I was at a pre-election party hosted by an American friend, where foreign diplomats and well-heeled Pakistanis nibbled on Sikh kebabs, when my phone rang with an anonymous number. The caller announced himself as a police officer and ordered me home immediately. He offered no explanation. I arrived home after midnight to find 2 vans filled with police officers parked at my gate. An older bearded man in civilian clothes stepped forward and handed me an envelope marked "By Special Messenger." He urged me to open it. "It is informed that your visa is hereby cancelled in view of your undesirable activities," read a letter on government stationery. "You are therefore advised to leave the country within 72 hours. The special messenger flashed me an awkward smile and then, in the finest tradition of subcontinental bureaucracy, politely asked me to sign for my own expulsion order. Bewildered, I went inside. I had been working as a correspondent in Pakistan for almost a decade, first with The Guardian and then The New York Times. It was a long time, certainly. Foreign reporters usually cycled out after 3 or 4 years, but I didn't see this coming. Certainly there had been difficulties. The Pakistani security services tapped my phone and intercepted my email. I received threats of legal action, often for outlandish sums of money. In one case, by a retired military dictator demanding $5 million. Months earlier, I'd received a death threat from someone who claimed to be with the Taliban. "Next time we will take action," he said. Pakistani journalists who helped me had been abducted and beaten by the security forces. One had been forced into exile. But I had grown to love Pakistan too, a country of hidden delights, endearing absurdities, and some of the closest friendships I had ever experienced. My work took me to corners of heart-stopping beauty and plunged me into strange, inspiring, or heart-rending situations. I had made my peace with Pakistan, and I thought Pakistan had made its peace with me. Undesirable activities. What did that mean? The next morning, I raced across town to the Information Ministry, seeking to undo the expulsion order. It was rare for the Pakistanis to kick out an accredited foreign reporter, and the acting minister, Arif Nizami, himself a journalist, claimed to know nothing of the expulsion order. He shuffled some papers, offered tea, and posed an odd question. "Have you been to Quetta recently?" I kept going. In the manicured garden of the Serena Hotel, the lobby was presumed to be bugged, I met an American diplomat who informed me the ISI was the source of my difficulty. "We're going nuclear on this," she said. I never saw her again. Late that night came a message from the agency itself, a senior ISI official, a suave and charming man I'd met for breakfast on the veranda of the Serena, sent a private message via a mutual acquaintance. "The order has come from the top," he said. "It is not reversible. You should start packing." What an infuriating moment to be told to go. Pakistan's most unpredictable and consequential election in years was taking place the next day. Nawaz Sharif, a 2-time former Prime Minister, was vying for power with Imran Khan, the country's most famous cricketer. Both men were from Lahore, 160 miles to the south, where the battle would be decided. Unusually, given Pakistan's history of rigged votes, nobody was sure who would win. It had been 48 hours since I received the expulsion order. Pakistan had a day to vote. I had a day to leave. I threw a hastily packed suitcase into a car and set off for Lahore. Sharif's previous term of office ended abruptly in 1999 with the coup that brought the army chief, Pervez Musharraf, to power. In exile, Sharif spruced up his image with a tuft of hair implants to disguise his balding pate. He campaigned in the company of a caged tiger, his party's mascot, an unfortunate animal that was paraded across the country. Opponents made fun of Sharif's prodigious appetite, but the middle classes of Punjab loved him as one of their own, and at boisterous rallies, exultant supporters hailed him as the Teflon Tiger. The actual tiger was less fortunate. It died of heat exhaustion before the campaign was over. Khan generated no shortage of electricity. The question was whether he could convert it into votes. After captaining the national cricket team to a World Cup victory in 1992, he became Pakistan's premier playboy, a friend of Mick Jagger, with a string of high society girlfriends. As his cricket career waned, the sports hero turned to Islam and politics, and his marriage to an English heiress 22 years his junior, Jemima Goldsmith, ended in divorce. Now, after years in the political wilderness, his popularity was soaring again. Tall and craggily handsome at 60, Khan retained his star quality, and adoring young Pakistanis flocked to rallies that had the buzz of a pop concert. He railed against American drone strikes and promised to eradicate corruption within 6 months. Progressives scorned him as an idiot savant. One paper dubbed him Im the Dim, and worried that he was a Trojan horse for the political ambitions of Pakistan's generals, to whom he was notably deferential. Clearly, each candidate had drawbacks. Yet, the election was a blast of sweet relief to weary Pakistanis. The country of 180 million people had been through a hellish period, the worst since its blood-soaked independence in 1947. A relentless wave of Taliban attacks had killed thousands of Pakistanis, as many as 150 in a single bombing. The former Prime Minister, Benazir Bhutto, had been assassinated. The teenage education activist, Malala Yousafzai, had been shot in the head. CIA drones fired missiles into the tribal belt. Frequent power blackouts plunged entire cities into darkness. 2 years earlier, a team of American Navy SEALs raided a 3-story house in Abbottabad, next to Pakistan's top military academy, and shot Osama bin Laden in the head. Somehow, democracy had survived. Arriving in Lahore, I found a city gripped by election mania. Voters jammed into polling stations, determined to cast their ballots. Even the city's pampered elite, more frequently seen in glossy magazines or at fashion shows, shrugged off their apathy. At one polling station, wealthy women in sunglasses yelled at polling staff. Outside, giddy young people waved thumbs splashed with the purple dye that proved they had voted. A family of Imran Khan supporters cruised past in an open-top sports car. "Look who's coming! The Tiger Hunter," they shouted. I shared their sense of relief. For years, my reporting from Pakistan had been filled with notes of chaos. Too often, I deleted the phone numbers of contacts who had died. Friends took comfort in conspiracy theories or sank into despondency. Now, that most delicate and precious thing, faith in the power of a vote, appeared to be taking root. The nation is fighting for its right, Fuzia Qayyum, a beaming bank clerk in her 20s, told me at a polling station. Best of all, the military, which had rigged so many earlier elections, was keeping out of it this time, or so it seemed. As I drove away from the polling station, a khaki jeep raced alongside and pushed my car off the road. A soldier jumped out and ushered me back to a checkpoint, where an officer delivered a lecture. I was supposed to be leaving the country, he chided, not covering the election. Eventually I made it to a friend's house, but ISI goons turned up at the gate and declared me an enemy of the state. I was packed off to the Avari Hotel until the next flight out of the city. Stranded in my room, I filed an election story and chatted with friends who managed to talk their way past the guard. Again and again they asked, "What have you done to be thrown out?" I still had no idea. For almost a decade I had puzzled over the workings of this perplexing, fascinating country, teasing out its nuances and arguing with those who chose to view its problems in stark black and white. But that night, as I sat in the Avari, it seemed to boil down to one hard truth. The military always wins. When the ISI men come to the door, the illusion of a democratic state melts away. Nobody can stop them. No judge, no lawyer, no ambassador, not even a minister. The angels rule. And so, at 4 a.m, I left, traipsing down the hallway with my suitcases, trailed by 3 ISI men who refused to help but, in a comical flourish, insisted on cramming into the lift with me. A friend was waiting in the lobby, Cyril Almeida, a senior journalist with Dawn, Pakistan's newspaper of record, who, furious at the news of my expulsion, insisted on driving me to the airport. We took off, gliding through the deserted streets in a convoy of 4-wheel drives and motorcycles with flashing lights. The election revellers had collapsed into their beds, their passions spent. Nawaz Sharif had emerged victorious, and would be the next Prime Minister. In the distance, a pink light glowed on the horizon. Then, I was in the departure lounge, alone. I thought of the friends I was leaving behind, my life in Pakistan, and I wrote on Twitter, "Here I go. Hard to believe this is happening." A voice over the loudspeaker called my flight. In a land of riddles, here was yet another one. It wasn't until years later that I would learn, through a call from a mysterious stranger, why the angels had expelled me. But that explanation made sense only as the culmination of a much longer journey through the glorious chaos of Pakistan. During my time in the country, I had made trips to the wildest, most far-flung and downright odd places. But the journey also took me deep into the psyche of the country where, as it turned out, I had poked an unexpectedly tender spot. It all started, almost a decade earlier, with a glass of beer. 1. Insha'Allah Nation, Land of Broken Maps. In the summer of 2004, I drove from my new home in Islamabad to the dowdy garrison city of Rawalpindi, about 15 miles away. The road led down a chaotic, fume-choked highway, where tiny yellow taxis weaved around hulking rainbow-coloured trucks, their flanks painted with delicate floral motifs. After passing the Army's general headquarters, I turned onto a quieter road, and pulled up outside a quaint-looking Victorian-era building. A pungent odour of brewing hops wafted through the air. The owner waited inside. Minu Bandara, perched behind an antique desk in a dimly lit office, resplendent in a 3-piece suit despite the 100-degree weather outside. He was in his 60s, a portly man with tinted glasses and a vaguely impish smile. A fan whirred overhead. "I'll be with you in a minute," he said, signing some papers. The walls were lined with framed antique cartoons that depicted pearl-skinned British soldiers in battle, firing at wild-eyed tribesmen or spearing them with bayonets, century-old company calendars. The Murray Brewery had been founded in 1861, to slake the thirst of the soldiers of the Raj, as British rule in colonial India was known. Now it was listed on Pakistan's stock exchange. "We're one of the country's biggest taxpayers," Bandara boasted. His success was puzzling. Prohibition had been in effect in Pakistan for a quarter-century, and any Muslim caught slugging one of Bandara's lagers could be sentenced to 80 lashes from an oil-soaked whip. Yet Murray Brewery was doing a roaring trade. largely on the back of sales to God-fearing Muslims, Bandara cheerfully admitted. Trade was so strong, in fact, that the company was expanding into foreign markets. A new line of single-malt whiskey was being casked in the cellar. "Have a Murray with your curry," was the marketing slogan in Britain. Bandara pressed a bell to summon an attendant. "A beer?" he inquired with a raised eyebrow. It was 9:30 in the morning. I gratefully accepted. I'd been in Pakistan a month or so by then, and the breakfast beer would prove the first of numerous riddles in the country. At that point, though, I was struggling to warm to my new assignment. Islamabad seemed dull and bloodless, a shimmering monotone of broad avenues and gaudy mansions. It was a chessboard capital, a low suburban sprawl that was divided into square neighbourhoods named after grid references or primary colours. My guest house was in F-7/3. The sleepy main shopping drag was the blue area. Houses were built in a bewildering range of styles: Imperial Rome, Spanish hacienda, 70s chic. Public monuments included a replica of the mountain where Pakistan exploded its first nuclear device in 1998, and replica missiles that appeared to be pointed in the direction of the Indian border. At night, rich kids drag-raced their father's saloon cars under the Margalla Hills, swerving to avoid the wild hogs that ambled from the bushes. Getting a drink involved ridiculous subterfuge. "Special tea, sir?" the waiters at the Marriott Hotel would ask archly, preferring a teapot filled with bootleg Chianti. Pakistanis from more spirited cities sneered at Islamabad's antiseptic calm. "Don't tell me that you live in that Hicksville," a peroxide-haired fashionista told me in Karachi. Westerners took a perverse pleasure in the capital's isolation from the chaotic country it ruled. "Islamabad, only half an hour from Pakistan," diplomats would quip at stuffy parties where gloved attendants served gin and tonics on the terrace. The torpor of Islamabad mirrored the wider mood of the country, then in the grip of its fourth bout of military rule. The generals had ruled directly for half of Pakistan's history since independence in 1947, always seizing power with an air of feigned reluctance. The civilians had screwed things up again, they would mutter. Time for a stiff dose of military discipline to set things right. The latest khaki messiah was Pervez Musharraf, the army chief who had ousted Nawaz Sharif 5 years earlier. A photo of Musharraf, broadcast on state TV in the early hours of the coup, was unpromising. A macho-looking officer in fatigues and brandishing a pistol, with a cigarette dangling from his lips. But Pakistanis quickly warmed to him. In contrast with Sharif, who had become erratic and autocratic in power, Musharraf turned out to have an endearing manner and a caddish charm. He played golf and tennis, smoked cigars, and sat in the front row of fashion shows where he flashed a cheeky smile at the models. He gave himself the title of chief executive and made extravagant promises of eradicating corruption. At an early press conference, Musharraf posed for the cameras with his wife, his mother, and his Pekingese dogs, Dot and Buddy. An image that enraged conservative clerics, who were unsure whether they hated dogs or women more, and delighted just about everyone else. Meanwhile, Sharif was taken to a remote fortress over the River Indus, stripped of property worth $8 million, and later dispatched into exile at a palace in Saudi Arabia. By the time I reached Pakistan in 2004, the Musharraf magic was fading. The military leader had organized a referendum on his popularity that was supposedly approved by 98% of voters, followed by an election that the ISI tilted in his favor. People grumbled, but it was too late. Parliament had been reduced to a toothless talking shop, stuffed with cronies and sycophants, and Musharraf's political rivals languished in exile, a state of affairs that suited the Americans just fine. The United States and Pakistan had been feuding and falling in love for decades. People often compared their tempestuous codependent relationship to a bad marriage, but it was more accurately the worst kind of forced marriage, a product of shared interests rather than values, devoid of genuine affection and scarred by a history of dispute and betrayal. It started during the Cold War in the 1950s, when the Americans ran a secret base in Peshawar from which Gary Powers, the pilot of a U-2 spy plane, took off before being shot down over the Soviet Union in 1960. The two countries forged a momentous partnership in the 1980s to expel the Soviets from Afghanistan, declaring victory in 1989. But barely a year later, Washington slapped painful sanctions on Pakistan over its covert nuclear weapons program. Stung, the Pakistanis made crude jokes about being treated like a used condom, and then 8 years later exploded a nuclear bomb anyway. The September 2001 attacks on America threw them together again. President George W. Bush needed Pakistan's help with the war in Afghanistan. American supply lines ran through Karachi, and with the hunt for the fugitive Osama bin Laden, who, as far as anyone could tell, had slipped into Pakistan's tribal areas. Bush hailed Musharraf as his buddy and lavished him with F-16 warplanes and billions of dollars in aid. The Pakistani leader reciprocated with terrorist scalps. Pakistan's intelligence services rounded up hundreds of al-Qaeda suspects and shipped them to Guantanamo Bay and CIA black sites, secret prisons in Poland, Thailand, and Afghanistan, where many were tortured. Grateful American officials heaped praise on Musharraf's controlled democracy. "You have to realize," one State Department official told me over beers in his Islamabad garden, "that this is the best we can hope for." He didn't even have the decency to blush. Pakistan's relations with India, meanwhile, bobbed along at a low ebb. A few years earlier, the two countries had flirted with mutual annihilation when an attack by Pakistan-backed militants against India's parliament building caused the mobilization of 1 million soldiers in both countries, raising the possibility of a nuclear war. Now they were back to more mundane tit-for-tat. An Indian diplomat invited me for Sunday brunch at her home. I arrived to find her standing at the door, sheened with sweat and proffering apologies. The electricity had been cut off, most likely by the Pakistani spooks who harassed the other guests as they arrived, and there was no air conditioning. The diplomat shrugged. "Don't worry," she said nonchalantly. "We do the same to their people in New Delhi." Pakistan was once a hopeful prospect of the post-colonial world. In the 1960s, when its economy was on a par with Singapore's, cheering throngs greeted the American president, Dwight Eisenhower, as he toured Karachi in an open-top limousine. Jackie Kennedy visited in 1963, jaunting around the garden of the military ruler, Field Marshal Ayub Khan, on the back of a camel. Indians, whose leaders were closer to the Soviet Union, laboured under a suffocating bureaucracy and a socialist economy. Pakistanis had Coca-Colas, imported Toyotas, and a modern new capital. But disaster struck in 1965 in the form of a misbegotten war with India, triggered by Pakistani attempts to instigate a revolt in the disputed territory of Kashmir. Pakistan lost, and the mishaps kept piling up. Assassinations, insurgencies, more military coups, and, through the 1980s, an influx of guns, narcotics, and refugees from war-torn Afghanistan. The greatest calamity by far occurred in 1971, with the secession of East Pakistan. The country was an oddly shaped entity from its birth, composed of two wings, East Pakistan on the Bay of Bengal and West Pakistan, centered on Karachi and Lahore, that were separated by 1,000 miles of hostile Indian territory.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?